Well, good morning, good day, good evening, good night, wherever you are that you're watching us from. I pray that everything's going good. We appreciate you dialing in and checking out the video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Like and share and subscribe to the channel. That helps us out a lot. We appreciate all of you that are watching the channel. And I just pray that I pray this videos that we're doing are a blessing for you. If you want to contact us, we're on the Facebook page. You can go over there and see some of our announcements or ask any questions, or you can contact us on our website at webbaptist.com. So today we're looking at the fifth session in our Sunday school series in regards to the Gospel of Mark. So to just follow up with what's been going on, we're looking at a session that is called Includes. Okay, and we'll understand that, but by the time this is all over, we'll understand what that means. Now, just to follow up, this is in a series, and the series before, and we're seeing that Jesus is in the thick of things. He is in the middle of his ministry. He is preaching the gospel. He is telling people about the coming of God. He's preaching about repentance and turning to God. He's casting out demons. He's healing people. He's doing everything, okay? And on top of that, his disciples, he has trained them. He has given them the power and authority to heal, cast out demons, and to preach the gospel, okay? So he has sent them out, and they've been doing this as well. So in the middle of all of this, his popularity is just getting outrageous. Jesus is doing so much in the countryside that the people are just in awe of everything he's doing. They can't get enough of him, and they follow him everywhere. So it's hard for Jesus to kind of get away from people so he can rest and recharge his spiritual batteries and pray to God and talk to his Father sometimes. And that's what we're seeing is going on here, and we're going to get into that in a minute. Now, last time on the last lesson, he fed the 5,000. So that was on chapter 6, 39 to 44. So now we're jumping ahead to Mark 7. So what's going on in Mark 7? Well, for the most part, the Pharisees, is getting on to the disciples because they're eating food. They're not clean. They're still nitpicking on everything. They're looking at the law. And Jesus, if we're looking at verses 1 through 23 of chapter 7, this is what the Pharisees are doing. They can't hold an argument against Jesus, so they're going to start picking on the disciples, thinking that they can kind of get rid of them and get them out of the picture, and then turn around and focus on Jesus. And what Jesus is pretty much telling them, he's saying, you're just casting away and you're getting rid of rejecting God in favor of your own traditions. Your traditions are more important than your faith. And that's what Jesus was telling them is your faith is dead because you're all about tradition and you're not about God. So that's where we are with that. So after that little confrontation with the Pharisees and the scribes, we see him go and he's leaving, and we're getting into Mark 7 verse 24, and we'll start at the lesson there. So he got up and he departed from there to the region of Tyre. Okay? He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, but he could not escape notice. So we just look at there. So he went to the region of Tyre. He didn't necessarily go into the city. It didn't say that. He went into the region. So that's kind of a general sense. So even in that general sense, it's kind of like, I'm going to go, this weekend I'm going to go to Georgia. That's a pretty big region, or northern Georgia, southern Georgia. But even in something like that, Jesus was found. I mean, that's how popular he was. So we don't know what house he entered. A house. Obviously, the house is not important. The fact of the matter is, he was trying to get away. He was trying to rest. He was looking for a place to rest. Okay, so he entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, but he could not escape notice. Now, first thing I noticed is the fact that he got up and left and departed, and from there in the region of Tyre. The disciples are not with him. There's no mention of them being with him, so he's by himself. I don't think Jesus has anything to be afraid of. But that's important. The disciples, the apostles had their own work to do, and that's what they were doing. They weren't always just crowded around Jesus all the time, and doing everything that he says there. Sometimes he sent them out, and I believe this is one of those times. So, but he could not escape notice. And we go on. Verse 25, instead, immediately after hearing about him, a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Gentile, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she was asking him to cast out the demons from her daughter. So let's stop right there for a second. So she was a Gentile, and we get more specifically that she was Syrophoenician, which is at that time Phoenicia, because this is where we're at. This is and we look at the map, and I'll try to have it posted up here on the side of me. We look at the map. He's over there kind of on the coast, and Phoenicia's on there. Phoenicians were very known as seafarers and sea traders and stuff like that. So they have a very unique history in that matter. So, but at the time, Syria controlled Phoenicia. So she was a Syrophoenician. So she was under that control and that administrative designation. So as we see in the New Testament, there's a lot more organization, a lot more of putting people by names and putting them in boxes and that kind of stuff. Taxes are, is more important than anything right now. So this is who she was. She was a Canaanite living according to Greek culture. So anybody outside of the region that was the Jewish people were doing the Greek culture. They accepted that and moved on. Samaria, when we start looking at Samaritans, they're Jewish, but they accepted the Greek cultures, and that's why the regular Jews, the diehards who stayed with the Pharisees and that kind of stuff, avoided Samaria because they felt that those Jews were unclean. Anyway, I'm just digressing. So, bottom line is, we see a woman. We have a couple of problems here. One, Jesus is a rabbi, okay, and that's what he's known by. He's a teacher. He knows the Word of God. He's a priest. And so now you have a woman, a Gentile for one, an unclean person, and a woman coming up talking to Jesus. Both of those things are taboo. So if you have the Pharisees there, I'm sure they would have had a heart attack seeing this, because again, you have this woman coming up, and you got to understand where she's coming from. This is a male-dominated world, and males pretty much own women at this time. So how desperate is this woman to come up to Jesus, who she never heard of? She heard of him, but she didn't know who he was. That she had to come up and just fall at his feet and pray to him. I truly believe that she probably knew something of it, and we'll get into that in just a second. So we have this custom where she's coming up and she drops down in front of Jesus at his feet, and she probably knows she shouldn't be there because, one, she's a Gentile, so she doesn't have permission to speak to him, and two, she's a female, and you don't really speak to the men unless you have permission. So she's taking great chance of going and addressing Jesus. She's taking a very big chance in doing this. So now, if we look at, I follow some of Ironside's commentary and his expository notes, and he's really good, even though he's kind of older. So if we look at what he's saying, if we go back to and we look at what was being said that she said, we're looking at Matthew 15:22. We see that she's asking him, "Thou art the son of David." So she's kind of saying, so she's got to be familiar with the genealogy of Jesus, and that may have come through her neighbors. Her Jewish neighbors, who probably told her, by his genealogy, he is the son of David. So she addressed him, son of David. And but as a sinner of the Gentiles, she had no claim whatsoever upon him as the promised son of David. So she's coming forward, and so the Lord thus answered the woman in order to bring her to a place where she would recognize that only her title to blessing was a ground of pure grace. So she's got no control. She has no reason to ask Jesus of anything. She has no claim. She's not Jewish. She's not a child of God. She's a Gentile. She has no business asking Jesus of anything. He's justified in saying, "Get out of my face. Go your own way." But look at what Jesus does. This is what separates Jesus from all of us. So she comes forward, and what is she doing? She says, when she was asking to cast a demon out of her daughter. So she comes here, she's desperate. She wants a demon driven out of her daughter, okay? He said to her, let the children be fed first, because it isn't right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Now, that may sound kind of harsh if we look at it. If I told you that, if you come for me to help, and I tell you the children comes first, dogs are fed last. That sounds kind of harsh. And many people don't understand that, but you got to look at the context of what's asking. So if she knows he is the son of David, as we talked about in Matthew, and so she's coming, and she believes in the miracles, and she believes in what's going on. Her response really explains that she knows exactly what he's asking and what he's saying. What Jesus is saying here is, he's here for the children of God. He's here for those people. He's here for Israel. He is here for those people that God has made a promise with. And God made that promise through Abraham, and he's fulfilling that promise. Jesus is here for them. Now, what promises come after that to the Gentiles will come through those children, not through Jesus. And that was his point. His priority is God's children. That doesn't mean that God doesn't love Gentiles any less than he did the Jewish people. But you got to remember, this is supposed to be a nation of priests, okay? And what God wants to do is he wants those children, he wants his Jewish children to know, this is my son. This is your king. This is what you need, okay? Now, what they do from there for the Gentiles comes at a later date. She wouldn't understand that, of course, but this is what Jesus is saying. He's got a short time on this earth. He knows it, and every day is paramount and every day is important. The Jewish people come first. But look at her response. But she replied to him in verse 28. She replied to him, Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. So she knew exactly what he was talking about. She didn't say, what do you mean? She didn't say, please explain yourself. Was she saying that even the dogs get some measure of grace? Even the dogs deserve something. And when we talk about dogs, we're not talking about wild mongrel dogs. We're talking about pet dogs. We're talking about dogs in the house among the children. Obviously, if these are wild dogs and mongrels, they wouldn't be having anything. They wouldn't be sitting under a table with children were eating. So we look at that parable and we have to understand where that's coming from. These are pets. These are, dogs, household dogs, kind of like what you may have in your house now. Okay, so she understood that. And she replied, even those dogs get something. They get crumbs from the table. Okay? So what was Jesus' reply? Then he told her, because of this reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. And when she went back to her home, she found the child laying in the bed and the demon was gone. Jesus was impressed with her answer. And she was right. That didn't mean that Jesus was wrong. But her faith is very important, and that's what grabs me, is the faith that we're looking at here. That Jesus was going through these territories not to talk to the Gentiles, but he was talking to the Jewish people in all these territories. Because you got to remember now, not everyone is living in set structured settlements. This is a wide open Roman provinces everywhere. Okay, and so he's more worried about the Jewish people than he is the Gentile, okay? But she's saying, even dogs deserve some measure of grace. And he was pleasantly surprised by that. I think he was moved because she understood exactly her place. She was not asking to be at the table. She was asking for a crumb that fell off the table. That's kind of like the lady that touches the hem of his robe. She wasn't asking him to put, she would just, that faith that she has to reach out and grab his robe and say, if I can just touch him, I'll be healed. That faith is what God looks at for us, okay? This lady was not saying, just bless me with everything. I got a problem. My daughter, she's possessed, and can you take care of it? And whatever you can do is the grace that I deserve. And that's what happens. So again, when we look at Ironside, go back to that, what did he say? In his words, so the Lord answered the woman in order to bring her to her place where she would recognize her only title to blessing was on the ground of pure grace. She had nothing to give Jesus. She had no authority. She had nothing, no promise. She had no claim to anything that she would ask of Jesus. Okay, so what was given to her was given by pure grace, and Jesus he had the authority to say yes or no, and he was moved by compassion and said, okay, she's okay, you can go home, the demon's gone. That's how instantaneous Jesus works, is right away. As they were speaking, he was like, he didn't have to go to the house, he didn't have to look at the child. And that's how powerful Jesus is. I mean, he's got that kind of authority that he doesn't have to be in that place. He can just say, it's gone. And we see that again in another section with the Roman. And this is the only 2 times that Jesus works with the Gentiles. So this is 1 or 2 of those instances where he does that without being at that place. So that was very important. So moving on, let's go through my notes real quick, and I think I've covered everything. Her statement demonstrated her faith as well as her humility. She knew her place. She recognized even the smallest act by Jesus would meet her need. And how do we look at that? Sometimes we are that woman, the smallest act. We get into some desperate situations with our families, with ourselves, spiritually, and we say to ourselves, if you do just a small favor for me, that'd be good. So what kind of faith do we have that we trust God to do that? What kind of faith do we have to where we can say, I recognize that when it happens? So moving on. So in Mark 31, again, leaving the region of Tyre. So now he was there in that region. Now he's leaving. He went by the way of Sidon to the Sea of Galilee through the region of the Decapolis. So what is the Decapolis? The Decapolis, for the most part, it's located on the eastern sea of Galilee. It's a name derived from 10 Greek 10 cities that were largely inhabited by Gentiles. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. So, and there were some Jews that lived among those as well. So that's what we're looking at there. So that's why he's going. That's why it's called Decapolis, because of 10 cities, 10 deca. So that's what we're looking at there. So looking at that. So going from where he was when he talked to the Pharisees in the early part of the chapter, then he goes to Tyre, and then he's coming back to Decapolis. You're looking at about 120 miles of him walking. So he's pretty busy. Getting his message out. And I'm pretty sure the whole time that he's doing all this walking, he's traveling. He didn't go to this area in this region of Tyre just for that woman. He went there to rest, remember. And instead, he ended up doing this because he was moved by her faith. And I'm pretty sure while he's there, he probably spoke and said some other things. He probably rested, and the next day he got up. And the whole time he's walking, I'm sure he's running into people, and he's talking to people about the coming kingdom of God. And he's telling them about repentance. So Jesus doesn't take a day off. He's constantly moving. So that's why when we look at his example, his priority has always been to talk to God and refresh his spiritual batteries. That's a lesson that we can take as well. We get caught up in a lot of work for God in the church and with each other and family, but sometimes we just got to pull away and we got to give some time with God. So I always go back to that because I feel that's very important. So now, so we're sitting here looking at this. And so again, leaving the region of Tyre, he went and he's in Decapolis. Now, let's stop for a minute just before we get too far into this. We got to remember he's been here before. So if we look at Mark 5, he cast out a demon outside the region of Decapolis. So he cast out a demon there, and that's the one with the swines that he drove into the hillside. So that happened at this place. So him coming back, so he's familiar with being here before. So when we look at this and we see why that's important, verse 32, they brought to him, Who else could they be but the people? So they see him, the masses, and they probably say, he was here not too long ago, and he took care of that guy that was running around, that strong guy that was running around in the cemetery, in the graveyard, and he was acting wild and crazy. He healed him. Y'all remember him? That's that Jesus that was here not too long ago who did all this. So they brought him, they being the people, they brought to him a deaf man who had difficulty speaking and begged Jesus to lay his hand upon them. So they knew, hey, Jesus took care of our neighborhood local demon-possessed man. He got him squared away. He got Carl squared away. What can he do for Jimbo? What can he do for him? Hey, he's back around. Here he comes. We got someone else that he can heal. Like, why not bring him? Go get him. Wake him up. Drag him on down here. Get him out of the house. That's what we're seeing now. I mean, again, the populace, are more interested in the miracles than the message. Because if they were interested in the message, they would all sit down at his feet and listen. But no, they saw a need that they needed to take care of. Now, are they wrong for doing that? No, I don't. Not necessarily, because if I saw someone who was in need of a doctor dying in my neighborhood and the doctor drove by, I'd probably say, hey, doctor, can you go help this guy out? And that's the same way with Jesus. If Jesus comes along and he can heal somebody, and I know someone who's had a tragedy for years, and there's no indication how long this guy's been deaf and mute, I want Jesus to look at that too. I'd bring him to Jesus, okay? So I kind of understand what they're saying, but they're just so wrapped up and tied up in the miracles and the healing that they really forget who Jesus really is. So now we look on. So in 33, so he took him, the guy that's deaf and mute, so he took him away from the crowd in private. I think Jesus kind of getting to the point where he ain't going to be a showboat. He's not a circus act, okay? Again, it's one of those things where Jesus is trying to take care of and get the message out, and not necessarily get the healing be the overall reason for him being there. So he took him in private. After putting his fingers in the man's ears and spitting, he touched his tongue. He probably spit on his tongue. Looking up to heaven, he sighed deeply and said to him, okay, and I'm going to read in my notes, Ephphatha. Ephphatha is what he's saying. Ephphatha, that is, be open. Immediately his ears were open, his tongue was loosened, and he began to speak clearly. Okay, so we look at what exactly Jesus did physically, putting his fingers in the ear and he spit on the tongue. Did Jesus really need to do that? Because we just saw him drive out a demon in the verses before, and he didn't even have to be in the building for that lady's daughter. Did Jesus need to do this? I think, in my opinion, and some of the people that I study, I believe that this was done as a way of communicating to the guy, because this guy couldn't hear or speak for God knows how long. So, Jesus probably indicating to him that it's going to be okay. Don't panic. It's going to be all right. And so that's what he does, okay? And we see the deep sigh is kind of like a groaning. Jesus is probably well aware of what the pain and anguish this man had to live with, so long as he couldn't speak or hear. There's no telling, sometimes we feel sorry for people, but do we really feel sorry unless we walk a mile in their shoes, so to speak? And Jesus has the power to do that. He knows full well everything in our hearts. He knows everything we experience. He knows every broken thing that goes through our lives. So that's what I think that he's looking at. He sighed deeply, and he said, I'm gonna heal you. And he's saying, be opened. Ephphatha. Be opened. And immediately, now he didn't say go home and lay down and in a couple of days this will be okay. No, and immediately this guy heard and he could speak. Very important. Because you got to remember now, Jesus is healing these Gentiles in their territory. Okay? So he's going to them. He's going all around the countryside. He's going to these people. And so he's doing this in their territory. Very important. So now, when we look at, back to Ironside, when I look at what he's saying, again, we talked about Decapolis. He drove out that demon. So, and we also got to remember now, and what Ironside is saying is when we're looking at the spitting and we look at it, he said, it pretty much indicates that the healing came from his own being. Jesus physically spat on the guy's tongue. So that physical healing came from Jesus. Just like the lady who reaches out, touches the robe, that healing came from the presence of Jesus to that lady. And so that's Ironside makes a good point when I was reading through that the healing came from Jesus, came from his being, from who he is. So now, moving on, Mark 36, he ordered them to tell no one, as usual, but the more he ordered them, the more they proclaimed it. So you got a bunch of hard-headed people in this crowd, don't you? And it just seems like it's always been the case. Jesus tells them, don't tell people about my healing. And he's even told, the leper, go to the temple and talk to the priest. But what did the leper do? He shouted for joy, and he was all about, what Jesus was doing. So they don't listen to what he's saying. They want him to heal. They want him to cast out demons. They want him to raise the dead, but they can't follow instructions. So that's something for us as well we got to look at. Verse 37. They were extremely astonished and said, he has done everything well. He made the deaf hear. He makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. So what's significance about that? He done everything. He has done everything well. They're not leaving any ambiguity or any doubt to what they've seen. Now again, these are people who are used to, they saw him driving out a demon not too long ago in the same place. Now he's back and he is curing a man of being a deaf mute. Jesus does everything. What they're saying, he does everything and he does it well. There's no question, no controversy, no doubt of what this man can do. The funny thing is they realize all that, but they're not listening to his message. Okay? Now, some people are truly listening to what he's saying, but for the most part, I believe the crowds are not. The crowds are more interested in the healings. They're more interested in the food. They're more interested in that kind of stuff. They're all on this mountaintop. They're all on this high wave with Jesus, and they're astounded. They believe in so much, but you know what? That wave's going to be coming crashing pretty soon, and when it gets into the valley, all these people are going to scatter, and they're going to be gone. But Jesus knows this, and what Jesus wants them to do, and Jesus wants them to realize, is the message is still the same. The message is still there. Okay, so that's what was important, and that's not what's going to, that's what these people are seeing at the moment. At the moment, they're seeing the miracles. So that's all the lesson we have for this week. I appreciate you dialing in and watching the video. Again, you can find us on Facebook at Webb Baptist Church. Go to our website at webbaptist.com and contact us there. Again, leave a comment, like, subscribe to the video. If you got a comment, concern, or prayer request, please leave them and we'll go ahead and get to them right away. Just a note for the gentleman who said he couldn't read the note. I got a little bit closer this time so you can see it. So again, we're going to be working on the background and we're going to keep improving our videos. I appreciate your response. I love you and look forward to hearing from you all again. Until next time, take care and God bless.